So this is a pose created by Boromark here in the chat. And his question was specifically how to pose this rig because it seemed to be less flexible than other rigs he had used before, as well as how to put some of the finer details in the rig. So this is supposed to be an angry expression. When we get angry, let me go full screen for this. If I get angry, you can see there's wrinkles that come in the eyes, especially as you get older. There's brow wrinkles. The forehead can wrinkle. There's a lot of extra details that your rig might not have access to. And in this case, you can see that this character is supposed to be like this angry squint. And oh, Animated Scott, jeez, thank you so much for the subscription. I love the content, man. 10 months. Man, 10 months already. Jeez, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Gotta do the dance. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And just Steph, hello. So the goal here is how do we get all of those details in there while also really just getting a super appealing pose. So the first part of this is going to be really studying the facial reference in the first place and getting a good understanding of what needs to be done. Now, this is going to come into a few different things. So looking at this, a few notes that I would have if I was giving a critique would be, and where's my pen? There it is. So if I was to give a critique on this, a few areas to watch out for, first of all, are the eyelids. The lower lids are a little too high compared to the cheeks. Lower lids really can't move on their own. You can kind of do it a little bit, but even if you kind of squint like this, it's not just the lower lids coming up, it's the cheeks kind of tightening up, and the whole eye mask is working to bring those eyelids up. It's not like our top lids where we can just open and close them as we blink. So these are feeling disconnected. It almost feels like someone's just lifting the eyelids like that, which breaks a little bit of the immersion of the face. The brows are a little too symmetrical, so we're getting this kind of just shape like this, which when we furrow our brows, we do get that a little bit of that shape, but that can be pushed. Then going down to the mouth is going to be one of the big ones, especially when you get like an anger expression. One of the big things that people tend to do when they first start posing out the mouth is that they tend to show the teeth a little too evenly. So right now, if we kind of look at the size of the teeth on screen and kind of think of it like spacing charts, so you've got the bottom teeth or the top teeth there, and then the bottom teeth here. And if you kind of look at that in terms of spacing, let's pick a color that shows up here. I need red, bright red. There we go. So if you look at that size, it's very similar. And this creates a, for lack of a better term, an unappealing facial pose. And it's unappealing for a very psychological reason. When we see teeth like that, where the top and bottom are very even, it kind of initiates our primal instincts of creatures that are snarling, like dogs or like dangerous creatures that would want to hurt us. Because as a creature snarls, you see the top and bottom teeth. Their lips separate so that their teeth have full access to bite us. And as humans, as animals, as creatures, we don't like that. That feels uncomfortable. So in general, a more appealing pose is to show one set of teeth a little bit more than the other. It just creates a pose that feels more interesting to look at and doesn't hit that kind of, I don't want to say uncanny valley, but that zone of primordial awareness that we have in our brain. So those would be kind of the big notes on this. Now, like you were mentioning, you we're having trouble finding those controls. So for example, the lower lid, if you can't move the cheeks, well, how are you supposed to put the cheeks up? So that's something I'm going to show in the Maya demo here. But before we get into that, let's actually analyze your reference. So this is Boromark's reference here, and he has some amazing facial poses here. These are fantastic. Like this, what you have to work with here is pure gold. I love these. That range in there is so good. So let's just focus on this one here first. And let's actually do this. I'm going to split the view so that we can see both of them. And this way we can kind of compare what's happening in both. Boromark is an AM student. So if we look at this, the first thing I look at when I look at the face is the line of action and the contrapposto of the face, just like you would with a body. So if you think of a human body and you have a character kind of just standing here like this, a pose can be very boring if we don't have contrast in the pose. So in this case, the shoulders and hips are perfectly even. Very quickly, we can make a more appealing pose simply by pushing the contrast of the hips and the chest, the shoulders, and we get something just visually more interesting. Wash and stretch, line of action, all of that kind of comes in compared to this linear pose. Let's see. Oh man, I miss the Rick Ashley memes. That was a good time. I loved those days. That was the Wild West days of the internet back then. So going back to, can't get distracted here. Going back on topic here, the face is the same thing. The face has contrapposto, it has a line of action. And if we look at what's happening in the face here, let's switch to the line tool. We get, if we just kind of follow the brows, we get a line here, and then follow the mouth corner, let's do a different color there, we get this. So you can see there is a contrapposto in there. If we were to extend the line, we can definitely see that one side is wider than the other. Now, if we look at your pose on the other drawing here, you can see that it's actually going the opposite way. It's doing this. So already we're losing a little bit of the integrity of the original pose. Now, is that a bad thing? Not at all. We can reverse lines of action if we feel like it would make our pose stronger, if we feel that it would make our shot better. That's not a problem. But what it does mean is that a lot of the facial features will have to be readjusted as well. Just something to keep in mind. So, looking at that, we can now look at the line of action of the face. The line of action, typically I look at the kind of middle of the forehead. Let's get my brush here. Middle of the forehead, middle of the brow, nose, lip, chin. So something like that. So if you kind of look at this, we get, if we simplify it, we get a little bit of a curve right in there, a little line. Now, once again, if we look at here, you are getting that curve, but it's the opposite. So just something to keep in mind, something to watch out for. Now, that's the first thing I look at. Contrapposto, line of action. From there, we can keep expanding what we're looking for. So let's start with the eyes. The eyes are something that often confuse a lot of new people when they're posing things out. So, for example, if we look at the eyes here, you see this very specific kind of squint right here, especially here. where the inner corner of the eye is pushed down, outer corner is up. This is something that you are doing correctly in your shot, so you don't have to worry about this specifically in yours, but just for everyone else, this is not the shape of the eye, not the eyelid. This is the shape of the skin over the eye, this part right here of the eye. The actual eyelid underneath this is shaped normally. And what I mean by normally is, if you imagine an eye, typically the shape is something like this, where you have that curve that goes up and then goes into the corner here. So something very basic like that. Now when we get angry, like when we bring our brows down, that is not the eyelid changing, that is the brow over top. So it is not, we're not getting this kind of angry eye shape here with then the angry brow over top. That would be wrong. That would be the eyelid itself being pushed down. Instead, you just put the brow over top like this. And now the character's angry. Now, on top of the brow, or underneath the brow, we have the skin, this section right here. And this is just skin that overlaps over the eyelid. So it's just something to be very distinct about. And you're doing that correctly here, where the eyelid shape is actually nice and round still. Right through there. Now, as we look through the eye, we get the squint of the eye. You can definitely see how much the cheeks are pushing up right through here. Now, one thing to watch out with the cheeks is that depending on the emotion, you're going to have a squash on the cheeks in a different area. So when we smile and really squint our eyes, or when we're looking at something really like trying to see something, that's usually the outer edge of the eye. The outer cheeks are squinting so that we can see better, or squinting because our smile is pushing it up. When we're angry, this is an inner push. Is it the same with a character crying? It depends. Crying it depends on the emotion of the crying. So you could have happy crying. Sad crying tends to be a little bit more kind of centered. You could have angry crying, which isn't more into the center here, like into the very center, whereas kind of typical sad crying is a little bit more like middle of the eye but slightly outwards. It's quite varied with crying. It's more the subtext of the cry, if that makes sense. So in this case, if we look at your cheek, it's not this part that is squashing. If it was, we wouldn't be getting these lines right here, because this would just press everything in right there. A lot of the lines would be higher up here. This is why you get the laugh lines, those crow's feet right in the very corner. When you're angry, you also get this line. And the reason for this is that your cheeks are actually pushing up this way into the corner. This is also why you get all the lines right here, because everything is pulling. The brows are pulling down. Everything is going right up into the center of the nose right here. That's what really sells pure rage, is that whole face kind of scrunching up to the bridge of the nose. Even the nostrils are being pulled up from that. So as we get to the cheeks, we're going to have to be very careful of how we push them. It's not just a matter of raising the cheeks up, it's pushing that musculature in the correct direction. Now, going to the mouth here, the mouth is going to be a very specific thing to watch for. So let's actually look at the teeth first, because we already looked at we mentioned the teeth before, how they were feeling a little even. If you look at your teeth in your reference, we can definitely see that the top teeth are a lot more visible than the bottom teeth. Quite a bit. This makes it appealing. It's not even and perfectly symmetrical. There's this offset, this spacing to it. And it could go the other way, where you do a little bit more bottom teeth versus top teeth. It really depends on the character. For example, when people are talking, some people talk with their bottom teeth a lot more. So their mouth tends to do these types of shapes where you see the bottom set of teeth. I tend to talk with my top teeth out a little bit more. So I tend to talk like this. My top lip goes up. Some people talk with both, but that tends to be very kind of uncomfortable to watch sometimes because it's just a lot of motion going on. So I fell down the stairs a couple of years ago. Oh no! Oh, that's horrible. Anything with teeth is like, no, why? Uh, uh, but yeah. So, just watch the spacing of the mouth is going to really help push that appeal. Now, the next thing with the mouth is going to be keeping in mind the shapes of the lips. Specifically in your case, when you have an angry face like this, there's an extra little thing that we can put in to really sell the anger, which is that the lips, typically we want to keep a very basic rule to it, which is simple versus complex. This is not always the case, but in most cases we want to do this. What this basically means is that one lip, either top or bottom, should be a simple line, then the other should be more complex. So for example, in this case, if we look at your your pose here on the other side, let me make that, let's clear that out here. So if we look at this, you've got the shape of the top lip, which is, there we go, red, which is kind of this simple line here, and then the bottom is this simple line here. So it's really creating this shape, which doesn't really sell any anger to it. It's just simple line versus simple line, and very similar lines. They're both arcs. So in general, just on how to push the appeal of this shape would be to either make one line more complex or simplify another. So for example, we could simplify the top lip. So now you get something like that. That already feels a little bit more dynamic. This would be that tight-lipped anger, where the top lip, let's go full screen, the top lip just kind of sinks in, and it's just like, I'm gonna get, and then you can see how that just becomes a straight, and the bottom lip is more exaggerated. It just gives a different feel, but it creates that contrast. Another way is, again, let's add some complexity, and this is what we're seeing in your shot here, where that top lip isn't just an arc, it's doing this. So it's got this extra little pull right here in the corner. And this is the sneer. So for example, if I do this, see how there's this kind of point right here. So if I just sneer that lip, we get that little and then it comes down. That's because there's actually a muscle that comes up and pulls this direction on our top lip, which gives us this extra point that we can add to our poses that make things a little bit more interesting. And you can see this happening in your shot, where if you look at the lips, they go up and then flatten down, come up again, and then down. Whereas the bottom is basically just that, just a curve. So already we're getting that nice complex, this kind of W shape versus a curve. That's going to give a lot of appeal to this mouth shape and really help push that anger, because that goes into the sneer. It brings everything up again back into that middle of the face. So those are the kind of the main things like we can look at when we're analyzing the pose. And you can do this with any of your poses. So really watch how every element is interacting and break down the shapes as much as you can. It'll really help to push your posing in general. Okay. Now, we've done that. We've analyzed our poses. And we can go even further. We can analyze the shape of the brows, the curvature of the brows, the nostrils, so much. At this point, once we've done this, it's time to start going into Maya and to start posing things out. So now is the part where we're going to actually be answering your questions here. So I'm going to move these off to the side so I can just kind of keep it as a reference. And let's open up Maya here. So I've brought in the shaman rig. I've just set it up so that I can pose him out from just the head. I'm not going to do anything with the body, just to keep things simple. And this is what we get when we open him up. All I've done is I've moved his arms down to avoid the T-pose, make it a little bit more relaxed. But this is what we get. Now, when you're using this rig, one thing to watch out for is when you turn on the facial controls. So facial control visibility, boop, turn that on. Like you mentioned, there's not that many controls. So for example, I've got this eyelid control here, but I don't have any controls for his cheek. I could push this, but that's adjusting the whole cheekbone. We don't want to do that. That's not quite the control we want. We've got this cheek control here. I could do it a little bit, but we're still missing a lot. How do you shape the eyelids? How do you shape the mouth? There's only these main controls. Well, if you select the head control here, there is another attribute. Facial fine controls. If you turn this on, there's all your controls. So now we've got this extra cheek control here that controls the whole puff of the cheek, and you've got all your fine-tuned controls for the eyes and all of that good stuff. So this is going to be the first thing, is just make sure you turn on both sets of controls. Typically, when you're doing quick blocking of a shot, you only need the main controls, because there's really no reason to go super in-depth with all the fine stuff. When you are doing facial posing, so in the case of your assignment here, you will need these. You can't, well, you could pose it out without, but you're definitely not going to get all of the finesse that you could normally. So that's going to be the first step, is turning all those on. Now with that, let's actually set a key on frame 1 here, and then I'll go to frame 2, and we can start posing this out. So as we pose this out, the first thing that I tend to do is I'll just do a quick pass over the whole face to get an idea of the pose, the line of action, just kind of get everything in place. It's kind of the blocking pass, you could say, of the face. I don't want to get too in-depth on details and like the nitty-gritty of things, because things change. So try to keep it simple first. And I'll usually start with the brows and the eyes, just because those are usually the things that people tend to look at first. So for the brows, that's going to be the big one. We have a choice, and this is going to be a choice that we'll have throughout the whole face. With this rig, we have a main brow control. And hey, Daniel, oh man, thank you so much for the subscription. 26 months, jeez. How has it been that long? Thank you so much. Oh man, thank you. Yes, back on track. So we've got a choice. We have this main control here that controls the entire thing, or we have these individual controls. Now, what you choose is entirely up to you and whatever you want to do. For me, I kind of bounce back and forth between. I either like to use just the main, the small controls, just use all of these together, because that really just kind of moves the whole brow anyway. And then this way I don't have to worry about counter animation, anything like that. Other times I mix them all up together. It's really up to you what you feel most comfortable with. In this case, I'm going to try to keep it simple And I'll just focus on the main 3 controls because we will need them anyway. So might as well use them. So let's start getting into that angry expression here. Now, in the angry expression, like we were saying, everything comes into the center. So that's going to be what I really want to push here. And as I'm doing this, the big thing I'm watching is the height of the brows. So bringing back your reference here, we've got this contrapposto. Now, the thing with the height of the brows is that the brows, how to put this, even though technically, visually, this side is lower, because, well, we can obviously see that it's lower if we do a straight line here. If you actually look at it from the angle of the face, it's higher than the other brow. So if you kind of create a line here and then do a perpendicular line to it, it's ever so slightly higher than the other brow. This is what's giving that contrapposto. So to kind of make this a little bit match the reference a little bit, let's actually tilt the head before we get any further. So I'm going to tilt the head. The head angle makes a huge difference when you're posing things out. For anyone who's doing head poses or facial poses, don't forget this step. It is too important. And I can even, let's tilt the neck forward just a little bit, make it a little bit more confrontational. So something like that. Let's see. I found it weird that you can't rotate the small eyebrow controls. Yeah, so some rigs have that, some rigs don't. Personally, I like it when they offer that. So for anyone who doesn't know, you can take these controls and sometimes you can rotate them to add an extra bend in the brow. This one, you can't do that, unfortunately. So a lot of it's going to be trying to push the translation further using all 3 controls. Start getting that that shape you want. I'm going to push these down quite a bit. I always try to over exaggerate poses as much as I can. And then let's try to push that shape of the round. You'll notice I actually pull it out as well because I want this tighter V shape on the end there. If it's too round, it makes him kind of look soft. So let's kind of push the brows a little bit like this for now. Okay, got that. The lighting I'm using is I basically just created a 3-point lighting setup with a sky dome. I can do a demo on this. Maybe if we have time today, I can do a demo on it. If not, I can do it on the next stream. It just creates a nice effect, and then you can see even his eye has some nice reflections in it. So as I move him around, you can see there's a world reflected in his eyes. I just find it makes it a little bit more fun to pose things. Okay, so we've got the eyes here. Let's do the lower lids. The lower lids are going to be a big part of this, so they're coming up and getting really squinty. If we look at your reference, you can see that the curve actually goes slightly upwards. So that's what I want here. I'm watching the curve of the eye, the eyelid I should say, and I want that slightly kind of upwards curve. Like that. Now, as I do that, it's going to be not that appealing. The lighting I'm using, it's a 3-point lighting setup with a sky dome. Right there. So we do this, and now the next thing I want to do is just take the skin controls underneath and push those up. Now you'll notice because we're going so extreme, we're going to get a little deformation. Just pull that back out. That's fine. And already this is going to help a lot. This adds a lot of that squint effect versus what we had before, which was just this. That doesn't look like squinting because it doesn't feel like the muscles and the skin have all been pushed together. So we'll get that. And we can even take, with this rig, he's got these wrinkles. Let's push those up as well. And you can see how that really tightens that face there. And we really start getting that squinty feeling. He doesn't feel relaxed anymore. He feels like everything's coming in. Now, this is super basic. We've literally just moved everything up. We haven't shaped anything yet. That I'm going to do in just a little bit. Now let's take the top lids, lower them down just a tad, just to add a little bit more to that squintiness. And then, this is going to be the big one for now, is I'm going to find the upper lid controls, not the eyelid, but the skin above the lid. So this, and just bring that down. I don't want to go too far, but you can see how this helps to make the lids feel, or the brows I should say, feel a little bit more like there's mass to them, whereas here they feel hollow. It's almost like there's just this gap right in there, which really shouldn't, well, technically there is a gap. You can see it right there. That shouldn't really happen. So I'm going to bring that down to help shape that. Now, again, very basic right now. I'm not trying to do any polishy stuff because I want to get the main shapes in place. From there I can work on it. Let's see, I had this question about the controllers between the lids and the eyebrows. Do you shape those controls according to the brow line? Yes and no. I shape them, but it depends on the pose, I guess you could say. Sometimes I will shape them based on the brow, because as the brows push down, that'll push those that skin down as well. Other times I shape it based on the design that I want to kind of accentuate the direction of the eye or which way the character is looking. It really just depends on the pose. So let's see. So kind of moving down, we can do a very quick pass on the nostrils. I'm just going to move them up a little bit. Even just doing that, see how when you move the nostrils up, it really starts adding that sneer effect to the character. He just feels a little angrier because everything is pulling up. Again, we're going into that point right in the bridge of the nose. Everything should be pointing up into that. Okay. Now, let's do the mouth. I'm going to open up his mouth, exaggerate that a little bit. Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is let's just kind of get the lips in place. So bring the top lip up. We want to see a little bit more top teeth, just a little bit of bottom teeth. So even just something like that, that's fine for now. I might exaggerate a little bit, but let's go to the corners of the mouth now. Now, this is a question you had regarding this rig specifically. On certain rigs, what you have is a depth control, which basically means that as you pull out the mouth, once you start getting this kind of fish face, which is basically when the rig just looks like they're doing this, being able to push that back in to create a round profile to the face, which is what our faces do. Our skin stretches around the teeth. This rig doesn't have that depth control. But all you need to do is translate it. Boop, done. So just translate it in Z, it's the same thing. And then you can rotate the control around to even push it a little bit more and wrap it around those teeth. So all of a sudden we get a mouth shape that's just a little tighter to that corner and doesn't just feel like someone hooked his mouth and pulled it straight out. Let's do the other one here. So you can see I just pull it out first just to get the main kind of posing. And then I'll just rotate this one. Keep that round shape in there. So there we go. Now, this is where again, the mouth right now doesn't look super appealing. It's very basic. It's just got this simple curve to it. We want to push that shape. So let's actually start shaping a little bit of stuff right here. The first one is going to be the mouth. I want those corners, that sneer in the mouth. So to do this, I'm just going to pull these corners right here up, take the center, move that down. And let's keep pushing that here, like that. Already you can see how that's pushing the mouth shape. And actually, let's undo this for now. And the reason is I'm going to just take all of this, and now I'm going to do another key here. This way we can compare. This was the first kind of just translating everything into a basic position. Now let's actually start shaping things. So again, lip, we'll take the top lip down a little bit. Make sure I grab the center as well, or else you'll get that weird zigzag shape. And let's pull this up. And already you can see how that is really helping to shape that anger in there. And if we think of our contrapposto again, you can see how we want to kind of squash on the screen right side. Well, I'll make sure that's a little higher here. Okay. Now, another question you had was, this rig doesn't have pinch controls. Pinch controls, for anyone who doesn't know, is the ability to just pinch the corners of the mouth and avoid this really round shape. So a lot of rigs by default, when you start posing them, they'll just have this really, really round shape there, which isn't super appealing a lot of the time. Our mouths aren't shaped like that. Anatomy wise, we do get a pinch in the corner. If your rig doesn't have that, most rigs actually don't. All you need to do is take your shaper controls here and just bring them closer together into the center. And there you go. Nice sharp shape there. You can see how that is much sharper than this one here. So same thing. Take this, move it in, and there we go. There's the pinch. So we're just creating the pinch in a slightly different way. Now, let's see. I want to maybe flatten that middle part of the lip here just a little bit. I don't want it to be too wiggly. I guess it could be the word. So something like that. And let's push the bottom lip a little bit more. So the problem with the bottom lip is right now it's very, very even. And that's not a terrible thing, but it doesn't make for the most interesting pose. So I'm just going to try and push that arc of the lips a little bit more. So we just get a little bit more shape to that. I want to be careful how much I show of the bottom teeth. But even something like that works a little bit better. It's just adding some variety to that shape. Okay. What else can we do? Well, one of my favorite things is just take the whole mouth and move it. So you can either do that or just use the lips like this. And we want to push that line of action to the face. So in this case, if I move the mouth this way a little bit, screen right, already we're starting to push that curvature in the pose. I could even rotate a little bit and even push that curvature some more. Now, on top of that, we could even just take the jaw, rotate, add a little bit in Y. Our jaws can rotate quite a bit. We can get some big rotations in there. So don't be afraid of pushing this. It just makes things more appealing as well. Okay, so something like that. Just chatting. Should you be just chatting or be the art category? Honestly, it doesn't matter. From what I was talking with other animators, and people were mentioning that the just chatting is more people tend to find things in there, so I've kind of been trying to leave it in there. We'll see. Technically, it is chatting. I'm not drawing or anything, so we'll see. So would you say that animating the smaller controls is the way to go with Shaman? And this is just my personal preference, I tend to animate the small controls on any rig. Because I'm going to be animating them anyway, I tend to skip over the middle controls. So, for example, I will move the big corner control. I will move the main lip control. But then I skip these red ones here. These are the mid controls. So they control kind of the range in between. Not the whole lip, but just a section of it. And honestly, if I'm going to be animating all the little ones anyway, why animate this one? Now I'm just dealing with counter animation. Sometimes I'll work with them anyway just because I need to, or it'll be a quick change. Just do it. But in general, I'll just go straight into the small fine detail ones because then I can get all the shapes I want. If that makes sense. Let's actually pull this out here. Okay. So we've got the mouth, let's call it, I'm not going to say done, but we'll just call it like in place for now. Just trying to think how far I want to push the mouth corners here. Bring that up just a little bit more. Okay. Let's move up a little bit more. We'll skip the nose. Well, actually, no. Let's go into the nose. And there's one thing I like to do with the nose is whenever I move the mouth quite a bit, I'll rotate the nose as well. With this rig, you do get a little nose motion, but I like to add a little bit more. It helps to push the line of action in the face. Okay. So now let's get into the eyes. The eyes are going to be the most important part. And let's start shaping the lids first. So with the lids, the top lid is very simple for the most part. It's usually higher towards the pupil. So you just round it out like you would normally do with any eyelid. Now the corners, don't forget to move the corners here. If a character is really angry or an extreme emotion that pushes up on the eyes, that pushes up the corner of the eyes too, in and out. So these are not solid points. These are not points that are like locked in, just glued in place. It's just skin sitting over top of the eye. This can move. So if I really want to push that feeling of pressure in there, I'll just try to move that up a little bit. Now, the lower lid, in this case, the top lid is going to be very basic, so don't have to worry too much more. The lower lid, this is going to be trickier because the lower lid, unlike the top lid, is affected by, or is pushed up by the skin around it, which means that the shape of it is going to change depending on the emotion. For example, when we're happy, that's the outer edge, outer cheeks that get pushed up and create the happy squeeze right in there. In this case, he's angry. That's going to be the center, which is going to push up in there. So let's kind of exaggerate that feeling in there, where the center of the eye is the one that's coming up ever so slightly. You don't want to go too far or else it feels very strange. But we just get a little bit more of a favor towards that that side there. Still trying to keep that curve in the eye too. Okay, something like that. Now, once we do that, we have to do the skin around the eye, and this is where it's going to really help. So for example, if he was happy, we would push more of a squish right up there. If he's angry, we're going to try and push it on the center over here. And try to really push that feeling of the inner eye being compressed in there. And you can see how now we get that little bit of skin that kind of feels like it's being pressured outwards right here. That creates that feeling of contrast in the eye, where it's not just this basic even shape. We're starting to feel how the muscles in the face are pressing up in different parts. So just something like that even. Okay, I might lower that eyelid just a little bit so we can see the pupil. Now let's do the other eye. So it's going to be very similar. Shape the top lid, very basic. We're not going to see it really, but I always like to shape it anyway, just in case. And then let's shape the bottom lid a little bit, and then shape the skin underneath. So something like that. And what I love about doing this is just trying to get that nice contrast in there. And what I mean by the contrast, again, is the feeling where you can see how the skin is looser in some areas, tighter in others. Okay. So something like that. So already we're getting some more pressure. Yeah, exactly. Everything is pointing in the middle. You want all the lines to feel like they're coming right into that bridge of the nose. Now, let's do the upper lid here. So the upper lid, the main thing that I'm going to try and do with this is just sell the mass of the lid. And I think partly that's going to be kind of bring the center down here and avoiding the inner edge just kind of feeling like it overlaps too far here. It kind of feels like it's just some loose skin. So I'm going to just try and shape that to be a little bit rounder and flow with the eyes a little bit more. So something like that. It's a minor shape change, but it makes a big difference. A lot of the face, it really just comes down to shaping things. Trying to avoid the feeling that the rig is, what would be the right word? Scrunching up in odd ways or doesn't feel natural. Or something like that. I might be able to lower this one just a little bit more. Something like that. Really push that squint feeling to it. So, something like that. Okay. So, starting to get there. Okay. So let's compare what we had before and after. So you can see this is just shaping. We had initially just posed everything out, just translated. And at this point, it's not a huge change. It's not like, oh, wow, it's totally different. That's not the point. We got the main pose, and now we're starting to just refine all the individual elements. But you can see how it brings more focus into that center. Right here, the eyes just kind of feel flat. The eyes don't create that graphical design that pulls us to the center of the nose. The mouth, same thing. It's just kind of disconnected. So by pushing these elements, we can start bringing everything in. Now let's take this pose here. And I'm just going to set another key. Let's see if we can push it even further. So, with this, Yep, let's not do that yet. I want to push the exaggeration of the lip shapes. So for example, I really want this point in here. So I'm just going to start moving the lip poses, or sorry, the lip controls to just exaggerate that shape. So even here, pull that in, just so we can get a little bit more of a point in that corner. What that's going to do is it's just going to give a little bit more visual contrast to the whole thing. And let's grab that one. So something like that. Maybe this one could be a little higher too. So something like that. I might try to pull the mouth corner out just a little bit. This is one of the things that I like to do a little, is show some empty space between the teeth and the corner of the mouth. So for example, if I do this, you can see how you just get a little hint of like black in the corners here compared to the teeth. That's the inside of the mouth. It creates this visual contrast where you have the white of the teeth and then the dark shadow inside the mouth. And that makes a little bit more of a visually interesting shape than if you get that corner right on the teeth. Technically, both are correct. There's not one wrong. But visually, this just tends to give a little bit more of an extreme to the emotion and just visually pushes the contrast. So you don't always have to do it, but it's something to keep an eye out for. And J-Star, thanks so much for the follow. So let's see. We've got that. Let's push this bottom lip just a little bit more. Just a little. Now, what else can we push? Let's push the asymmetry of the nostrils. So this way we feel the one side being pulled up a little bit more than the other. We can push the asymmetry of the brows as well. I kind of left them very symmetrical, so let's try to exaggerate that. And as I'm doing it, what I'm trying to watch out for is that I don't get this kind of perfect W shape. That would kind of defeat the purpose. I want one side to be a little softer than the other. So even something like that, you can see how one side definitely is a little bit more visual than the other. Now, what else can we do? Well, now we can start going into the finer anatomical details. So things like, if the top lip is coming up like this, it's going to stretch. So let me find the control. This is the fun part with facial animation, is once you start pushing things, which that's when your poses get much more interesting, you start pushing the controls into the face, which then makes it very hard to find them. So what I'm looking for is the top lip control. Basically the opposite of this one. Which should be, there it is, it's in the middle of his nose. So the reason I want this one is there's the pump and roll attributes. I want to see how those work. Yeah, so let's take that top lip and just roll it in a little bit. So you can see how from the side, this is just going to pull that lip in and kind of tighten it towards the teeth. I can then just take that top lip and bring it in towards the teeth as well. Then the bottom lip, we can do a similar thing where, see how, look at all of that gap right in there. There's just this big void between his teeth and his lips. Well, let's push that a little bit and tighten that mouth up just a little. This is going to help exaggerate the shape, and visually, if we were animating this, what it's going to do is give that dynamic change. So let me go full screen here. One of the big things I tend to see people kind of miss when they're animating things is they kind of animate it from a front view, the lip sync, and just kind of move it in and out, side to side, and up and down, which is great, except it's missing a huge element of the face, which is the in and out. So if I do this, watch how much my lips are moving in and out, how they tighten against the teeth, and then they relax and go out, especially when I go do shapes like out, out. And I'm not exaggerating this. This is just the way I normally talk. And you can see just how much they move in and out and back and forth. If you don't have that, you miss out on a huge chunk of the appeal of lip sync. And as a student, when I started out, I missed that all completely. And I moved my camera over to the side and the lips were just like perfectly still. It was awful. It looked so bad. And Récupère, thank you so much for the follow. So really watch that in and out. Now let's see, where else can I push things? I don't really like that little pinch I'm getting there, so I'm gonna round that out. Even though we don't really see it here, it's just something that I want to make sure I get a good clean shape on. Something like that. Let's kind of stick with that for now. Might move this corner down, or not this one here down, just so it doesn't feel like that bottom lip is kind of weirdly overlapping. Do you have any videos on facial modeling? Unfortunately, I do not. I haven't done facial modeling in a while. It is something I've been wanting to get back into, specifically facial sculpting. I just need to find the time to do it. So let's see, with that, kind of keeping with the mouth, the next thing I like to do is make sure I move the tongue. Anytime you have the mouth really wide open, that tongue should probably not just be perfectly flat in the mouth. It should be doing something, whether it's relaxing, whether it's curling. There should be something to it. In this case, if he's angry, I would want to add just a little bit of a curl to that tongue. And make sure I don't select the teeth. Just the tongue controls. So that's a little too much. Always over exaggerate and then bring it back. It makes things much more interesting. Okay. So something like that already helps quite a bit. Now, on top of that, don't be afraid of scaling the tongue. The tongue is very flexible. It's a muscle that has no bones to it, which means that it can flex and shape itself quite a bit. So I could make the tongue thinner, wider, flatter. These just help to give a little bit more personality to the tongue and avoid it just kind of feeling like a piece of rubber in the mouth, which usually is not that interesting. And Pella, thanks so much for the follow. So let's kind of push this up a little bit more so it doesn't cut through its own mouth there. Okay, so even something like that helps. Additionally, I could take this and add a little curl to it. So I tend to like to do this a little bit, especially with angry expressions. It just tends to be a little bit more dynamic if the shadow and lighting actually hits the tongue. Honestly, we're probably not going to see much of it based on the angle here, but it just kind of helps. And one thing I'm kind of thinking is I need to push the asymmetry of the mouth here just a little bit more. Okay. And I'm actually going to take the whole nose and move that up as well, just to add some squash to the face. Usually you want to do this very subtly. If anything, maybe move the upper nose or the tip of the nose. In this case, I just want to exaggerate a little bit, so I'm going to push that up. Okay, what else can we do? Teeth. Teeth are one of those things that in general you would never move, because in reality we wouldn't move our teeth because, well, they're teeth. They are basically bones sticking out they're sticking into our skull. Now, the character could have dentures, in which case you can move them around, but that's still not going to look natural in real life. In animation, who cares? We're going to push these to make the maximum appeal in the pose. And as long as no one sees us moving them, so what that means is as the character is animated and moving, you're not seeing the teeth sliding around in the mouth, then you're fine. And if you look at a lot of animated films and actually watch the teeth, look at the teeth and how they relate to the skull, you'll notice that they don't line up. They've been moved. And it makes the pose much more appealing. So for example, here I can push the angle of the teeth to help push that curvature of the face here. I could even scale them a little narrower if I wanted to just avoid that big wall of teeth like that. You can see how that kind of looks a little creepy, whereas kind of bring them in just a little bit helps to avoid that. I can rotate them, so basically rotating them in this case is to help avoid that perfectly flat line that can be created with the teeth. By rotating them forward ever so slightly, you can see how that creates a curve to the teeth, which tends to add a little bit more visual appeal to it. And with this rig, which I love, is you can actually shape the teeth as well. So really push how this whole area looks. I kind of want to bring the back molars up slightly and kind of have the front teeth stick down just a little bit more. So that's going to do a very specific thing, which, let me do the bottom teeth and then I'll explain it. The bottom teeth, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to bring the teeth up and then kind of bring them back down so we don't get just lots of teeth here. And I can even take the molars here and push them even further down. Okay. So what is this doing? Basically what it's doing is it's exaggerating the angry expression of the mouth by having the front teeth be more visible. So the front teeth and the front teeth on the bottom, they become a little bit more visible and more of a focus without kind of just filling the mouth with teeth. And what that tends to do is it exaggerates the expression in a way that is appealing. It adds contrast and variety. Now, the other thing that it tends to do, which I really like, is it creates an unrealistic mouth shape. What I mean by that is if he was to try and close his mouth, see how his back teeth don't touch anymore? There's no way he could close his mouth. This is his closed mouth right now. His front teeth have touched, and that's it. He would not be able to chew his food. But doesn't that look kind of appealing in some weird cartoony way? Instead of just having this flat row of teeth that are just teeth, suddenly doesn't he seem like so much angrier? Like you can almost feel the pressure on those front teeth are gonna crack. He's just grinding his teeth so hard. For some reason, it just, even though it's totally wrong and it just wouldn't work in reality, it makes things more appealing. And just to show an example of this, yes, exactly. Lots of pinched and triangular shapes. That's the big thing, where instead of flat, boring lines, we're trying to go for these pinches, these triangular shapes. Triangular shapes tend to be more graphic and violent. They have more confrontation to them compared to flat shapes, which are more relaxed. So I'm just trying to find an image here. I know there's one here somewhere. I should just have... Okay, here we go. So, this is from Hotel T. Look at Dracula's teeth. See how they're pinched in the corner, or the front there? The front teeth are touching. The back teeth are separate. An impossible pose. Unless your teeth are really, really bad, no one could survive with their teeth like this because they would literally starve. They couldn't chew their food. But it works. It's interesting. Oh, take care, Greg. Have a great night. Ren and Stimpy. Oh man, that would be a fun pose to try and recreate in 3D. I'm gonna write that down, just because. Where's my pen and paper? Okay, I'm just gonna type it out on my computer here. Because that is a brilliant idea. Ren and Stimpy poses. That would be so cool. Going back into this, let's see what else we can try to do to exaggerate here. So we've done the teeth. We've maybe actually looking at the teeth here, I might take the bottom teeth and make those a little narrower as well. Just a little bit. Yeah. Okay. What else can we do? Well, we can keep pushing the face. Maybe I could exaggerate the bend of the nose a little bit. Really, it just comes down to shaping everything. I think one thing I do want to do is push the iris and pupil size. Make the irises just a little bit smaller. Just so we see more white in the eye. When you shrink the eyes and squint them, it can be very easy to start getting this effect where all it is color, which tends to look very unhuman. It tends to look a little bit more animalistic. So if ever you've seen, for example, cat's eyes, dog's eyes, elephant's eyes, chimpanzees, there's less white and more color. Humans have a lot of white in their eye. So this will tend to make your character look more animalistic, which if that's what you're going for, perfect. If you show more white, ooh, maybe not that much, that's a little too much. If you tend to show more white, it tends to create a little bit more of a human expression. I might just increase the pupils just a little bit so we can actually see them. Smaller will make him look angrier, but if we don't see them, then we don't connect with the character as much. Now, would you use the squash and stretch controls? Yes. I don't use them all the time, but with this rig, you have these eye controls here. So for example, I have this one, which actually allows me to rotate the entire eyelid if I wanted to, as well as this outer one, which allows me to just kind of move the whole eye wherever I want. So we could really go all out with this pose. There we go. Why does it... For anyone who's ever seen the Ernest movies, the Ernest Halloween special, doesn't this... I don't know, maybe it's just me. Does this remind you of the troll from Ernest Halloween special? I don't know. Probably no one else knows what I'm talking about. Man, his eyes look wide now that I undo that. So we can do all sorts of things. We can move the eyes. We can scale them. So for example, I could scale down his eyes. Yes, someone else remembers it. That was one of, for Cameron and I, when we were growing up, that was our Halloween. Like every Halloween we had to watch it. It was, I don't know why, we just loved it so much. So I could really kind of push these eyes just a little bit smaller, which in this case is going to make him feel just a little angrier. I think the other thing I can do is I'm going to try to push the brows down a little further. Just out of curiosity more than anything. Yeah, that's much better already. So if I undo, you can see how that kind of feels relaxed. That adds that strain in there. Always try to exaggerate. It helps a lot. So we can do that. We can even do the same with the mouth. So I could scale the whole mouth down and make this angry little mouth. Or we could scale it up. Maybe scale it a little wider. There's all sorts of things you can do. And it really just depends on how far you want to go with it, honestly. In this case, I want to keep it a little bit more close to realistic, so I'm not going to go too far. So we get something like that. And looking at it from the side, because we did those lips, you really feel that tension in the mouth, especially that top lip, how it's pulling into the teeth. I always love seeing that. It just makes things more interesting. Now the bottom lips here, I kind of feel like they're a little wide, so I might try to pull that corner in just a little bit more. We'll see. Now that I scaled the teeth, I think I can pull that in just a little bit. So something like that. How do you keep track when animating all these controls? Basically, I know that I almost always use all the fine-tuned controls, so I don't have to keep track of them because I know I'm using them. And if I always set a key on every frame, or on every pose I should say, so on every pose I just key everything, I don't have to keep track of anything. And facial animation is one of those things that it actually moves so fast, so just everything kind of changes so quickly that even if you lose track of a certain control or you start getting some counter animation, it's not that hard to counter it and start to and just fix it right away. So as long as you're not going super crazy with it and kind of just animating one control and then you just never key it again and then animate another control, never key it again, that's going to get a lot of weirdness. Aside from that, facial animation is actually very easy to avoid kind of weird animation. So we've got that. Now, lastly, we do have these kind of stretch controls here. So I can now use these to push the whole line of action of the face, even the top of the skull. Oops, not the skull itself. This one, that's the one I want. Like this, just to exaggerate that squash and stretch, and even the front. Let's kind of bring everything forward. So everything's like, it's like a black hole. Bring the whole face in towards that section. And his jaw, let's actually stretch it out a little bit so we get a little bit more volume in there. So we get something like that. Okay. There we go. So we've got the facial pose. Just Google Ernest. He's amazing for face reference. Yes, he is. And he's also the voice of Slinky, the dog in Toy Story, which is always fun. So with this, let's say we've got our pose pretty much in place. Let's actually go through where we started. So this was the beginning. Man, he does not look the same anymore. Then we posed it basically just with translations. That's just putting everything kind of in place. Shaped it a little bit. And then refined the shape. And this is using squash and stretch, pushing the teeth. You can see how the base shape is pretty much the same. But by pushing the teeth, especially, like just look at the mouth. How this is just boring and very toothy. This one, it's much more visually dynamic. It just pops. The eyes, by scaling them down, and then I took the eyes and the brows and I moved all of it down to kind of bring it all closer together. We get that extra squash in there. I even brought the eyes in a little bit. As part of it that you have more depth with those adjusted teeth? It's a lot of things. It's more depth, more visual contrast. When we see just teeth like this, it's just a lot of the same curve. So for example, here is one curve here, and then another curve here, and then the top teeth is a similar curve. It's a lot of just, for example, if I was to draw it out, it's curve, 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 curve. So if we were to actually turn this into teeth here, something like that, it's just a lot of the same curves. But if you do something like, oops, like, I'm terrible at drawing teeth. Let's actually draw it down here. So if you do something like this, now suddenly you have this dynamic shape to it. And it just becomes more visually interesting versus everything just lining up. It's totally unnatural. It does not work in real life, but it definitely makes the pose more interesting. Okay. So, we've got this. And I think for the most part I've answered all of your questions except one. And if I'm wrong on that, definitely let me know. The last question though was, how do we get all the fine details in here? So we've posed this out, but what about all the really cool details, all the wrinkles and the extra anger in there? How do we get that in? Well, by default you can't. By default, if the rig doesn't give you those controls, you can't do it. But doesn't mean we can't make our own controls and add it in manually. So once you get to this point, the next point here is, and this is like high level polish, you would do this once everything is kind of finalized, then you'd go into this next step here, which is adding new blend shapes to the character. So to do this, there's a simple way and a more complex way you can do it. So the simple way is just select the geometry for the body here. For this rig, just make sure you select the root control and then make sure body select is turned on. So we've got that. And for anyone who doesn't know, blend shapes are ways of controlling the shapes of geometry. It's a way of animating shapes. So if you go to Windows, Animation Editor's Shape Editor, takes a little bit to load. This is all of the shapes that are already in this character. So these control the deformations, the extra, like if you move the control, making sure that the face doesn't explode, things like that. We can create our own in here. So to do this, with the face geometry selected, I'll just hit create blend shape, and then I'm going to, you'll see it creates one right there, and I'm going to add the target. This is the geometry. So the blend shape here, let's call this angry. And with this, you'll see that the shape right now is in edit mode. What this basically means is that any changes we do on the geometry right now are going to be saved and allow us to animate those changes. So with this, I can now start modeling this. Now you can do all sorts of different modeling techniques. You can just shape it with moving vertices or faces. For me, I like to go to Mesh Tools, Sculpting Tools, and just use these ones here. So for example, I could take the Sculpt tool and start cutting into the geometry. Now, let's actually make sure my controls are okay, good. So with this, I can start to try and add wrinkles to the face. And the immediate thing I'm going to see is that I don't have enough detail in the face. See how I'm trying to just sculpt things and it's just, all I'm doing is crushing his face. That's not going to look that good. Some rigs you will have more detail on the rig, others you won't. If you find that you don't have enough detail, in this case, for me, this is not enough detail to create a proper sculpt and really get the facial details in there. What you can do is you can create a subdivision proxy for this. So what that is basically a high-res model that is connected to this one. So I'm going to take this face here, or the geometry, and I'm going to go to mesh, and then let's create a smooth proxy, subdivision proxy, and I'm going to open up the settings. And by default, the default settings should work. I'm just going to increase the division level to 2. This will give me a little bit more extra detail. Now let's hit smooth. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to create a new copy of the geometry. So look at how much detail is in this geometry now. That's quite a bit more compared to the old one, which is still there. So now I can turn off the visibility on the old geometry. And now I have super high res geometry. And it still runs pretty well. It's going to be a little slower, but this is why you wait until the end to do this, so that your animation is all in place. You might have to do little tweaks if you need to. But with this, I can now go back into my blend shapes. Let's create a new blend shape. Add a target. And this is going to be, again, angry. Okay, there we go. And let's just move this out of the way. And now let's grab my sculpting tools. So with this, let's try to add some anger lines in the corner of the eye here. So my strength here is a little too high. Let's turn that down. You really don't have to go too far with this in terms of sculpting this into the face. So I want to just adjust some brush details here, just so I can get a little bit more out of a brush that I like. Okay, so something like that. Let's go with that. Now to change the brush, just hold down B and middle mouse drag. That'll change the size of it. Well, using the high-res version of Shaman in the master control. No, so the version that I was using was the high-res. And for this kind of stuff, the high-res just isn't high-res enough. So you'll just want to go even further. Some rigs you don't have to. Other rigs you kind of do to really get the fine-tuned controls that you want. That's a little sharp. Okay, that's a little better, I think. Okay. And I think I'm just going to tone down that strength even more. So now I can just take this and start to sculpt in some extra lines. So for example, this is where, looking at your reference here, and we've got a bunch of lines. Let's look at this one here. Look at the lines of the face and just kind of use those as marking points. So for example, there's this kind of line that comes out from here. Let's kind of cut that into the face a little bit. Make it a little wider. Now my strength's a little too low. Let's go 0.3. Oh, no, actually that's pretty good. So we can cut a line in there. kind of build up some wrinkles in here. And you can really just go all out with this. So one thing to keep in mind is if you cut into this, keep in mind the skin is bunching up. So it's not just cutting in. That's not what wrinkles are. It's skin that pushes and compresses against itself. So you want to kind of build up channels in there. So something like this. Now you'll notice this is super rough, but once I get this in place, I can always just hold down Shift and smooth things out a little bit. Soften that up just a little so we don't get these really harsh lines. So we can do that. Let's add a little bit in the brow here. So make this a little deeper right there. Maybe add in like a little extra in the upper brow here. Maybe another one right there. Now, one of my favorite areas to add this kind of stuff in is the nose, because the nose really gets these like tight lines here, these compressions that go through, and that can really help to accentuate that that anger. You can already feel it right in there. It's not a huge difference, but it's that little subtlety. Now I can show you exactly how to do that in just a second here. I'm just going to add another cut right in here. So let's say we do that. I could even add like a little bit more detail in the facial area right there. You could go all out with this. Like if you want to add some like stress in the chin as well, or like really push that. Let's make this a little bigger. Push that division of the chin versus the lip a little bit more there. Soften that up. So you just start getting a little bit of that musculature in there, which really when we're angry, that's what happens, is the musculature starts to stand out. And I just realized I forgot to push the cheeks in. If he's kind of yelling out, his cheeks are either going to puff out or get sucked in a little bit. So, but let's say we want to animate this now. To do this, you would just take your angry expression here. Let's go out of edit mode. So just hit edit. Now we're not doing any edits anymore. And all we'll do is animate this attribute. So you can see if I tone this down, all those anger lines disappear. Tone it up, they come back. So all I would have to do is, let's say on frame 4, I'm going to turn that off. So I'll just hit the key button right here, this little dot. Make sure that's off. Then on frame 5, keep that on. And maybe not go so far. This is the nice thing. I always try to over sculpt things. This way I can just kind of tone it in to the amount that I want. Just enough that we see it and feel it, but not enough that it starts to really distort the face. And then you can turn it on and off and have it fade in, fade out over time instead of just like snapping on and off. It's really cool. And you can use this not just for little details. You could reshape the character's nose. You could give them a big chin. Like you could do anything with blend shapes. They're really cool. If you want a character getting hit in the face and the whole face is like smushed and like warping, you could just turn that on a blend shape and then turn it back off on the next frame. So you just get that one frame of just the face exploding in horrible pain. But you can see now, like if we just look at the frame before and after, it's not a huge difference. Honestly, it's not going to make or break your shot. Yes, they would. So if I was going to take more time, I would make sure to like bring them into V shapes. Right now they're a little too parallel. It's these wrinkles aren't quite right. They should narrow down a little bit more. So definitely take your time with this. This is, again, that final polish pass where you want to just take some time, make sure you get it right, and then, yeah, add it in. But you can see how that just adds that extra little bit of anger in there that we don't get here, especially in the brows and the nose. The nose, especially for anger, is where you see it a lot. Just having those two little lines right there, it makes, at least for me, a world of difference, because you suddenly get that anger, like that full fury where everything is compressing again into that center bridge. So yeah, there we go. So if we compare again all our facial poses, so we start off with this rig, which looking at him now is like, this is not the same character. And we went from here, started shaping things, exaggerated those shapes, and then sculpted in some details. And we get a much more interesting facial pose. And all of it came from studying the initial pose and then trying to understand what we can do to recreate that, and then pushing it even further. And a lot of that just comes with experience. A lot of it comes with practice. But it definitely makes for more interesting facial poses. And you can really go all out with this. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully it answered all your questions. If you do have any other questions on this, I think I answered them all, but if I'm missing one, definitely let me know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all of it. Trying to think if there's anything else I could talk about on this. Well, actually, I did want to do the lighting setup if anyone's interested in that. Let's see. Let me actually save this because I haven't saved it all. And actually one final note here is I just want to compare, and this is just to show like what pushing those expressions will do. So let's go here. Can I just refresh this? So you can see here how, especially the eyes, you just get a lot more of that anger. The mouth, if it's round, it doesn't feel furious. If you leave the eyes wide, up, there we go. If you leave the eyelids open, you're losing a lot of that strain, that really just pure fury. All the elements are in your pose right now. They just need to be pushed further and exaggerated further. That's really it. And this goes for everyone, especially when you're first starting out your facial posing. A lot of it is just understanding how everything's connected and exaggerating it even more. And the one thing I didn't do here is I could have pushed the cheeks a lot more, personally. So take these controls and kind of push that up like so. Let's do the other one here. Get that mass of the face up. I wouldn't really touch these ones here too much because that's the cheekbone, unless you really want to exaggerate. Only one question. In my ref, I have my hand close up to the camera, but I can't get the effect in Maya. Is there something I can do with the focal length? Yes. So if you want to exaggerate that depth of the scene, let me actually, I'm going to go back here and very quickly, I'm just going to, where is it? So creepy. I want to find the high res geo. Turn that on. Okay, good. And turn off this one. Just so, oh, and I don't think that was the right one. Oh well, we'll just have to leave it the way it is. Not this way, the other way. There we go. So if I, oop, no. So this is where you just want to keep track of your geometry. I just hid the other piece just kind of on a whim. Make sure you keep track of it. That way you can always switch between the high res and the low res. It's just going to mean that things are going to run a little slower. So in terms of the focal length, you can do this in a few different ways. So let's kind of bring this out here. So the camera that I'm using right now, this is a 50mm lens, which means that it's going to be a little bit flatter than the default camera. So I can pose out his hand here. And you can see the size of it is okay, but not the greatest. It's not the big contrast that I want to have, potentially. Now, a way you can change this is to take your focal length of your camera and lower it. The lower the focal length, the more extreme distortion you're going to get. So let's go, for example, a 35mm lens, which is my kind of default. Now you can see the hand is much bigger on screen. If I lower this to, let's say, a 15mm camera, now his hand is bigger than his head. So that would be one way to do it. The problem with that is the lower you go with the focal length, often the less appealing the face is, because it starts to distort the features of the face, and the face normally looks really appealing at around like 40 to 70mm. Between like 40 to 50, that's the human eye. That's typically where the human eye lies in terms of focal length. So it feels more natural in that range. It doesn't mean we can't go above or beyond that. It just means that we might start getting weird distortions. So oftentimes what I prefer to do is I'll just take the hand control and just scale it. Maybe not that big. So let's make it 1.3. Like that. And then as long as you kind of rotate the arm in a way that the perspective doesn't stand out, no one will notice. So it's just cheat it. That would be my advice, is don't worry about trying to worry or to get the exact focal length, to get the exact size. Get the focal length you want for the scene, and then use the scale to change it, or you could even just stretch the arm. So I could either scale the hand up like this, or let's keep the hand the same, switch this to IK, and then just drag it way out. And once again, as long as I hide the perspective of the arm, you won't notice. The audience won't really see it unless it's standing out a huge amount. And then with this, what you can also do is, I believe, where is it? on this control, you can turn off auto squash and stretch. So now you'll see that even though the arm is stretching, it's not stretching it and thinning it out. It's keeping the mass the same, which technically this is not correct because the mass should shrink as the arm is stretching. But it means that in this view, it looks like it's the same mass, and no one would guess that it's actually like twice as long as it should be. So that's the way I would do it for most shots. Now again, this depends on the exact shot. Another big factor is this film, or is this going to be filmed on a 3D screen? So for example, with the 3D glasses and everything, because that's going to be a lot harder to hide that cheat than if it was just on a normal screen. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Now, how do you manage the ratio of gum to teeth? I always feel like the gum makes things worse. Yeah, gums are tricky. It really depends on the pose. Oftentimes, I like to show just a little gum. So for example, like we can see a little bit on this side, but I try to avoid like this, where it's just all gum. To me, it's just kind of, what would be the right word? I don't want to not show it, especially for something angry like this, because the angrier you get, you will see some gum in there. But I try to just keep it low if I can. Or at least, even if I have some gum showing, try to make it so it's not all gum. So there's no real like formula or anything like that. It's whatever feels good at the time and for that pose. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes a little less. Very rarely is it all gum. And then I would say for extreme expressions, very rarely is it just no gum. Usually there's going to be a little bit.